Hello everyone, welcome to Reading in Philippine History. In this video, we are going to discuss about the taxation, Filipino cultural heritage, Filipino-American relations. First, we have the taxation. So what is tax? Taxation is defined in many ways. Commonly heard definitions includes is the process which the sovereign, through its law-making body, raises revenues used to defray expenses of government. It is the collection of share of individual and organization income by a government under the authority of the law. Taxation is a term for when a taxing authority, usually government, levies or imposes a financial obligation on its citizens or residents. Taxation is the system by which a government takes money from people and spends it on things such as education, health, and defense. The act of principle of levying taxes or the condition of being taxed. Levying or levies is the seizure of your property to satisfy tax debt. Concept of tax. Taxation is the inherent power of the state to impose and demand contribution upon persons, property, or rights for the purposes of generating revenues for public purpose. The power of taxation upon necessity and inherent in every government or sovereignty. Classification of taxes. As the subject matter in taxes, here we have the personal pool or capitation, tax of a fixed amount on individual residing within a specific territory within regard to their property, occupation, or business. The example for this one is community tax. Second one, we have the property, imposed on property, real or personal, in proportion to its value, or in accordance with some reasonable method or appointment. The example is the real estate tax. Excise. Imposed upon the performance of an act, the enjoyment of privilege, or the engaging in an occupation, professional, or business. Income tax, value-added tax, estate tax, donor's tax are example for excise. Who bears the burden? Of course, who bears the burden are the taxpayers. We have two kinds of taxpayers. We have the direct and indirect. First, we have the direct taxpayer. The tax is imposed on the people who also bears the burden thereof: income tax, community tax, and state tax. Indirect taxpayers, imposed on a taxpayer who shift the burden of a tax to another. VAT and customs duties are the examples. Determination of account in taxes. We have the specific tax, imposed and based on a physical unit of measurement as by head number, weight, length, or volume. Like for example, the distilled liquor, fermented liquor, and the cigarettes. Imposing taxes in distilled liquor and fermented liquor are different. The ad valorem tax of a paid fixed proportion of the value of the property with respect to which the tax is assessed. The example of ad valorem tax are the real estate tax, excise tax on cars, and non-essential goods such as jewelries and gadgets. The purpose of tax: general, fiscal, or revenue, imposed for the general purpose of supporting the government. Examples are the income tax and the percentage tax. As you can see, there is a table below, the income tax tables under the train law. Special or regulatory, imposed for a special purpose to achieve some social or economic objectives. Examples are The protective tariffs of customs duties on imported goods extended to protect local industries. Distinction of tax from other terms. We have the tax distinguished from toll. A tax is demand to sovereignty while toll is for demand for proprietorship. A tax is paid for the use of the government's property while a toll is paid for the use of another property. A tax may be imposed by the government only while the toll is enforced by the government or a private individual or entity. Tax distinguished from penalty. A tax is intended to raise revenue, while a penalty is designed to regulate conduct. A tax may be imposed by the government only, while a penalty may be imposed by the government of a private individual. Tax distinguished from debt. A tax is based on law, while the debt is based on the contract. A tax may be not assignable, while a debt is assignable. Tax is generally payable in cash, while debt payable in cash or in kind. Person may be imprisoned for a non-payment of taxes, but any person may not be imprisoned for non-payment of debt. Tax distinguished from other terms. We have the revenue. This refers to all the funds or income derived by the government, whether form of tax or any other sources in another sense. The internal revenue. It refers to the taxes imposed by the legislature other than duties on imports and exports. Customs duties. They are taxes imposed on goods exported into country. Entities exempted from taxation. We have the religious institution such as church, mosques, and parsonage, charitable institution, non-profit, non-state educational institution, non-profit cemeteries, government institution, foreign diplomats by virtue of Treaty Art 15 Section 3 and 4, 1987, Constitution Art 7 Section 28 Part 1. Situs of taxation. Situs is the Latin term which means situation, location, or place. Its literally meaning refers to place of taxation. In real property, the rule is tax is imposed to place or state such as city, municipality, or province where the property is located. Subject to be taxed has a jurisdiction over said property. In movable property taxation, the rule is mobilia sequuntir personal, a Latin term or phrase which means movables follow the law of person. It gives us idea that the place or state wherein your property is located has a jurisdiction in imposing the payment for property tax. Concept of double taxation. The two concepts of double taxations are the direct duplicate and indirect duplicate. Indirect duplicate has the following elements: twice taxing by the same taxing authority, within the same purpose, for the same purpose, in the same taxable period, and involving the same period. Forms of escape from taxation. There are 6 forms of escape from taxation. First, we have the shifting. Shifting is one way of passing the burden of tax from one person to another. There are 3 kinds of shifting. We have the forward shifting, occurs when the burden of the tax transferred from a factor of production to the factor of distribution. Backward shifting occurs when the burden of tax is transferred from a factor, the consumer, to the producer or manufacturer. Onward shifting occurs when the tax is shifted to 2 or more times, either forward or backward. Second form of escape from taxation, the capitalization. This refers to the reduction in the price of the taxed object to the capitalized value of future taxes which the purchaser expects to be called upon to pay. Transformation occurs when the manufacturer or producer upon whom tax has been imposed pay the improving his or her process of production. Tax evasion is the practice by the taxpayer through illegal or fraudulent means to defeat the lessen the amount of tax. This is known as tax dodging. Number 5. Tax avoidance. The exploitation by taxpayers of legally permissible method in order to avoid or reduce taxability. This is known as tax minimization. Number 6. Tax exemption. This is grant of immunity or freedom from financial charges or burden to which others are subjected. Grounds of exemption. We have the contract, wherein the government is the contracting party, public policy, reciprocity. And now let's go to Filipino cultural heritage. What is heritage? According to Christopher Tunard, it is the cultivation of a cultural patrimony. According to Liu Yuan, it is as much about people as it is about relics and the challenges to balance preservation within the modern realities. Heritage or pamana is anything that one's value. Cultural heritage according to Republic Act No. 1006 or the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009 refers to the totality of cultural property preserved and developed through time and passed on to posterity. Heritage is our legacy from the past, what we live with today, and what we passed on to the future. The World Heritage List includes 6 Philippines property: the Tubata Reef National Marine Park, Rice Terraces of the Philippines Cordilleras, Historic City of Vigan, Puerto Princesa Subterranean National Park, Baroque Churches of the Philippines such as Santo Tomas de Villanueva and Miaglao, Iloilo, San Agustin en Pauay, Ilocos Norte, Nuestra Señora de Asuncion in Santa Maria, Ilocos Sur, and San Agustin in Intramuros, Manila. The 6th properties is the recently included Mount Hamigin Range Wildlife Sanctuary in Davao Oriental. It is important to keep in mind that there are 2 types of heritage. One is tangible heritage, consisting environments such as natural landscape, the indigenous flora and fauna, and the historic man-made structures. Meanwhile, the intangible heritage consists of tradition and living expression that constitute a culture and worldview. As mentioned earlier, tangible heritage includes our indigenous flora and fauna and natural landscape such as the Philippine Eagle and Chocolate Hills in Carmen, Bohol. Here are other examples of tangible heritage. Urban heritage site like Vigan City, and the oldest dated house in the Philippines is the 1730 Jesuit House in Cebu. Another example is the Santo Tomas de Villanueva Church in the town of Miaglao, Iloilo. Its architectural design is primarily earthquake baroque with large butcheries that can withstand constant seismic activities on the island. Another example of heritage is costumes. Note, for example, that the depiction of Filipino in Justino Asuncion watercolor painting in Tipos del País in 1841 and see which garment is still worn today. The textile or fabric used is also part of our tangible heritage. Wood carvings such as those in Paete, Laguna are also considered our tangible cultural heritage. What about Philippine literatures? Are they tangible or intangible? Literature is tangible heritage in form of codified text, such as El Filibusterismo, No Limitang Hirek, Mga Ibong Mandaragat, at Katambuhay. Because of literature include the oral tradition, fully narrative, and epics, which are often chanted or sung, constitute our intangible heritage. Nowadays, scholars document the text to preserve these literatures. Another example of intangible heritage is the cuisine. Doran Fernandez explains why studying Philippine food helps trace the continuous of Filipino history and identity. Language is also part of intangible cultural heritage, as it speaks about our cultural past. For example, the fact that the pre-Spanish Filipino believed that the liver atay was the set of emotion, and it is called in the other Philippine language as atay, atay, hatay, hati, or ati. That is why in Tagalog emotion is dalamhati. And intense feelings or grief, yearning, and happiness are pighati, lughati, and luwalhati. Article 1 Policy and Principles, Section 2 of National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009 declares that the state shall foster the preservation, enrichment, and the dynamic evolution of a Filipino culture based on the principle and unity in diversity in a climate of free artistic and intellectual expression. According to the Heritage Conservation Society, entails all the processes and the measures of maintaining the cultural significance of a cultural property, including but not limited to preservation, reconstruction, protective, adaptation of any combination. The following are the institution, entities, and laws that aim for the preservation and enrichment of our cultural heritage, tangible and intangible. The History Preservation Division under the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, National Commission of Cultural and the Arts or NCCA, the non-government organization, the Heritage Conservation Society, Republic Act No. 1006 or the National Heritage Act of 2009, Act providing for the protection and conservation of the national cultural heritage, in strengthening the NCCA and its affiliated cultural agencies, and other purposes. We as a people benefit from the conservation of our culture as they define who we are. When cultural heritage is appreciated, enhanced, and enriched, socio-culture, religious, political, and economic gains are manifested. The values of cultural heritage is seen in the strengthening of the sense of national, regions, and local identity, which the external benefits as part of the educational and acculturation of the young. This is the summary of Filipino cultural heritage. Cultural heritage refers to the totality of cultural property preserved and developed through time and passed on to posterity. The Philippines is enriched with cultural heritage that needs to be protected and preserved. Cultural heritage may be tangible or intangible. It is important that a cultural heritage is appreciated so that enhanced and enriched socio-cultural, religious, political, and economical gains are manifested. Now we are here to Filipino-American relations. Today, American influence in the Philippines are still apparent. How do American influence affect our culture? Let us review. The Treaty of Paris, signed on December 10, 1898, transferred ownership of the Philippines from Spain to the United States at the cost of $20 million. Tyding-McDuffie Act, or the Philippine Independence Act, defined the establishment of the formal Philippine Constitution by a Constitution Convention. Through the 1935 Constitution, the Philippines from 1935 to 1946 adopted a Commonwealth government which served as a transitional administration that would prepare the country for its independence. On July 4, 1946, the United States granted the Philippines its independence, but on certain conditions. The U.S. colonization of the Philippines couched in President McKinley's benevolent assimilation, which meant that U.S. domination was all for civilizing the Filipinos. The mission was considered the white man's burden. Examine the political cartoon published in 1899 in which a white man is bathing a Filipino child in a pool of civilization. One would be curious to note that the child holding a spear looks more Polynesian than any of the indigenous groups in the Philippines. Why do you think is that? The US also introduced the public school system, especially through the 600 American teachers aboard the USS Thomas in 1901, known as the Thomasites. They would teach young Filipinos the English language and with it, the American culture. At the height of the Philippine-American War, the retaliation of the assassination of American troops in Balangiga, U.S. General Jacob Smith ordered the military to kill everyone over age of 10 and to make the island into a howling wilderness. The Balangiga massacre would become one of the grisliest war crimes. As war trophies, the American troops took the 3 bells from the Church of San Lorenzo de Martir and brought them to the United States. The U.S. liberation of Manila during World War II left the city ruins as the USAFFE or the USAF dropped bombs after bombs to expel the Japanese forces. A year later, 1946, the Philippines was granted its independence. In 1947, an agreement was made to give the United States a 99-year lease for the continued operation of its military bases in the Philippines. The Mutual Defense Treaty was treaty made in 1951, indicating support for each other in case the United States or the Philippines was attacked by an external party. The U.S. military is the Far East where strategic location for the Cold War that ensued right after World War II. The Philippines became its strongest ally in fighting the threat of communism or anything that resembles it. On Philippine soil, the United States sponsored the presidency of Ramon Magsaysay to quell the peasant-formed Hawk Rebellion. Aiding the Philippine government, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency or the CIA deployed a psychological warfare in which the Hawk rebels were made to believe that an aswang was hunting them. The U.S. maintained and operated the major bases such as the Clark Air Base until 1991. In historic Senate, both that rejected the treaty to extend the presence of the U.S. military bases in the Philippines. These are just examples of the continuous U.S. intervention in the Philippine affair, despite the official declaration of the Republic independence. Filipino-American relations mainly focused on economic and commercial ties for a time. In 1996, President Fidel Ramos declared 4th of July as the Philippine-American Friendship Day. Visiting Forces Agreement, or the BFA, is a new agreement between the two countries to resume their bilateral military exercise and enhance defense cooperation. The U.S. conducted ship visits to the Philippine port and combined military exercise with the Philippine military. BFA remains in the place until both parties agree to terminate it. In 2002, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo expressed support for the U.S. war on terror and hosted the first Balikatan exercise, a yearly joint exercise of the Philippine and U.S. Army. Extended its war on terror in the Philippines, the U.S. sent its troops to Basilan and Zamboanga to hunt the Abu Sayyaf group. In 2014, President Benigno Aquino III signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, with U.S. President Barack Obama. EDCA aims to promote peace and security in the region by reaffirming the relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines, improve interoperability of the two countries' armed forces, promote the countries' long-term modernization, maintain maritime security, and strengthening humanitarian assistance in responsible to natural disasters. This does not end America's political and military influence in the Philippines, though for a time, the joint U.S. Military Assistance Group handed military equipment to the Philippine Marine Corps. The EDCA agreement also does not allow any nuclear weapons to be stored in the Philippine territory. The agreement is effective for the period of 10 years unless otherwise terminated by either party. In his 2017 State of the Nation address, President Rodrigo Duterte demanded for the return of the Balanga Bells. The U.S. allowed the reparation provided that the transfer is in the national security interest of the United States of America. After 117 years, the bells were finally returned on 15th of December 2018. Duterte further insisted that the United States apologize for its atrocities in the Philippines and that the America treat the country as its equal and sovereign, perhaps signaling a substantive change in our perception of special relation with the U.S. On July 6, 2019, at the 18th Bilateral Strategic Dialogue, the two countries signed the Philippine-U.S. Alliance Fellowship. Founded by United States, the fellowship sends 2 Filipino scholars to the U.S. every year to study national security and international relations. In lecture given by the writer Gina Apostol, she explores the Filipinos' ambivalent relation with the United States. The U.S. for the being both an ally and nemesis is what she would call as our frenemy. These are the summaries in Filipino-American relations. The Treaty of Paris, signed on 10th of December 1898, transferred ownership of the Philippines from Spain to the United States at the cost of $20 million. John's Law, or the Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, declared the purpose of the U.S. to end its colonial rule over the country. Tidings-McDuffie Act defined the establishment of a formal Philippine constitution by a constitutional convention. On 4th of July 1946, the Philippines was declared independent. Thank you for your time and listening. Sayonara.